The first crack in my calm came the day I realized just how deeply Kenny had deceived me. I had already spent an incredible $200,000 on him, a man who hadn't shown his face at my mother's funeral, and who, without a word of warning, had suddenly vanished overseas. The question gnawed at me day and night. What on earth did he do with all that money? Thinking back, I remembered the grand piano that used to dominate the living room of our family home. Its glossy black frame had once echoed with warm, sentimental music. I had grown up hearing its melodies fill quiet evenings, our mother humming softly as my brother practiced. It was, in every sense, a treasured heirloom. When I decided to sell the instrument, I assumed I might make enough to cover household repairs or medical bills. I never imagined it would bring in nearly $200,000, but that immense sum, it wasn't mine anymore. Because Kenny, in his boundless arrogance, had acted under the belief that the piano belonged to him, a laughable, tragic misunderstanding. Officially, the inheritance to the family estate and all its contents rested with me. But the piano itself had always been different. Grandfather had bought it specifically for my brother, a music teacher whose love for that instrument ran as deep as blood. He had left it in our home only because of its size and because our mother adored hearing it played. To sell it was unforgivable. To sell it without my brother's permission felt criminal. When I confronted Kenny and explained the mistake, asking him to repay or compensate my brother, he said nothing. The line went silent. Then came the click. He had hung up. My name is Rachel Schneider, 45 years old. A quiet office worker from a family whose history stretches back to colonial times. Ours was a proud name, built on discipline and legacy, not scandal. Yet that legacy came with burdens, expectations, traditions, and the constant suffocating need to carry on the family line. That duty had driven me into the tiresome search for a husband. And Kenny, 10 years younger, soft-spoken, with boyish modesty, had seemed like a small miracle when I met him at a singles mixer. I had mistaken gentleness for strength. His quiet manner had felt like calm beside the roar of my demanding family. When I told him, early on, about my bedridden mother and the care she required from both me and my sister-in-law, Catherine, he reacted with kindness that seemed genuine. I'd love to help, he said earnestly. It's what family's for. A month later, he proposed. I remember crying, overwhelmed by the thought that perhaps someone was choosing me out of love and not duty. For a short while, he held true to his promises. He smiled easily, made tea for mother, even sang softly as he tidied the kitchen. But only a few months into our marriage, he came home one afternoon with that heavy, regretful look. Rachel, he began, eyes darting away. I can't go back to the daycare. The parents are impossible. Too many complaints. I just can't handle it anymore. He wanted to quit his job. Permanently. I should have protested, but I was 3 months pregnant and exhausted. The thought of adding an argument to the heavy air in our home was unbearable. I convinced myself that once the baby arrived, he'd find his footing again. I was wrong. A few weeks later, stepping out of the shower, I heard Kenny whispering on the phone in the next room. His tone, soft, smug, instantly chilled me. I froze by the bedroom door, clutching my towel, my heart thudding. I told her I quit, he murmured. Yeah, she bought it. 2 years without work and she still doesn't see it. Guess marrying rich really paid off. I stood there in shock, the air sucked out of the room. He hadn't lost his job, he'd lied from the very beginning. I wanted to storm in and rage at him, but my hand fell to my stomach. The thought of my baby silenced me. Days later, my sister-in-law Catherine noticed the storm I tried so hard to hide. Rachel, you look worn down, she said gently, as she adjusted mother's pillows. If something's bothering you, please, talk to me. Catherine had always been good-hearted, patient, and stronger than she looked. She cared for her own mother for years, and now she looked after mine with quiet grace. The truth spilled from my lips before I could stop it. I told her everything, Annie's lies, my fears, the burden of my pregnancy. She listened carefully, eyes steady. I'm glad you said it out loud, she said softly. Keeping it all inside would only hurt you and the baby. Talking doesn't solve everything, but it helps you breathe again. I almost smiled. For a moment I felt lighter. But that small moment shattered when the doorbell rang. Without waiting for an answer, Kenny walked in, the proud husband's smile plastered across his face. "I thought I'd come help with Mom's care from now on," he announced cheerfully. "You shouldn't strain yourself, Rachel. You're not in a safe stage yet." He was performing again. I saw it, the exaggerated tenderness, the false concern. I wanted to scream. Before I could answer, Catherine stepped forward. "No, Kenny, it's fine," she said firmly. "I've got it handled. You should rest." Her tone carried the strength of someone who had seen right through him. Kenny blinked, surprised by her confidence. "Suit yourself," he muttered. But I caught the flicker in his eyes, anger, pride, maybe even fear. Catherine later whispered that she suspected something far worse than laziness.
"He's hiding something," she said, "and I'll find out what."
That evening, while I pretended to leave for errands, I lingered down the hall, heart pounding, listening. Catherine confronted him in a calm tone that barely hid her disgust. "Why are you really here, Kenny?" she asked. "Why do you care so much now about being the one in charge?" His reply came sharp, venomous. "Why are you here every day? Hoping for a share of the inheritance? Don't think I don't see what you're after." My breath caught. Catherine gasped. Then her voice steadied. "How dare you say that? I cared for this woman long before you appeared. Don't twist this into greed." He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "This family's wealth belongs to me and my wife. Don't get ideas." I wanted to burst into the room, but Catherine's quick glance toward the door signaled silently, "Stay out." She handled him with poise, but his words grew crueler until finally she stood up and said, "This is pointless," before walking out. After she left, I stepped outside too, trembling with anger and shame. I didn't know how I'd ever apologize to her for the ugliness she'd endured on my account. Kenny, meanwhile, decided he was now sole caretaker. He told me not to interfere, insisting he'd learn by doing. But his negligence was immediate and severe. Missed medications, skipped meals, carelessness disguised as fatigue. And then, our mother was gone. Her funeral was held at the same old church where generations of Schneiders lay buried beneath carved headstones. Relatives gathered, whispering questions about Kenny's absence. He had disappeared completely the day she died. Catherine wept openly at the altar, apologizing for ever trusting him. "It's not your fault," I told her, though my own voice trembled. "None of this is..." Yet neither of us could ignore what nagged at the edges of grief. Neighbors mentioning a truck scene outside the house days before Mother's death. The sound of heavy lifting. The echo of something precious being moved. Days after the funeral, Kenny finally called. His voice was so relaxed it made my skin crawl. I could hear music in the background, a live band perhaps. "Rachel, don't worry, everything's fine," he said, almost laughing. "I'm in Europe. You wouldn't believe how beautiful the hotels are." I nearly dropped the phone. "You missed my mother's funeral," I shouted. "Where did you get the money for this?" He paused only long enough to say, "Oh, the piano. I sold that thing. Got 200 grand for it." My heart stopped. The grand piano, that sacred heirloom my mother had always called our treasure. He had sold it, pocketed the money, and spent it on luxury hotels abroad. I could barely breathe. The truck. The neighbors. It all made sense now. "That piano wasn't yours to sell," I said slowly. "It belonged to my brother. Our grandfather gave it to him before we were even born." Kenny scoffed. "Really? I thought it was ours." "Well, I can apologize to him when I get back. It's just a piano." Just a piano. My brother, a proud piano teacher whose life revolved around music, would never forgive such a betrayal. That instrument was more than furniture. It was his history, his heart. And the thought of him learning that his late mother's beloved piano had been sold without permission, desecrated for cash, was sure to trigger a severe reaction upon sharing this information. Phone abruptly hung up, leaving Kenny likely regretful and contemplating the consequences. I decided to call my brother and inform him of the situation, knowing he would be livid. The next day, I orchestrated a gathering with the Hale family present, including my brother and his wife Catherine in as Kenny. entered through the front door, his eyes widened in surprise seeing everyone in the living room. Confused, he questioned the gathering, to which my brother, wearing a menacing look, responded, "Kenny, I heard everything from Rachel. What were y'all thinking? Selling someone else's property, especially something that valuable, without consulting the family?" Nervous and visibly uncomfortable, Kenny attempted to justify himself. I stuttered, trying to explain I was just trying to help with the chores around the house out of boredom when I saw the old larger grand piano. I thought no one was using it anymore. My feeble attempt at justification continued. "So you decided to sell it?" my brother asked sternly. Kenny admitted, "Yes, I mean it seemed like a waste just to leave it there." My brother's expression remained stern. Ash interrogated further. "Really, that piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manucure? Where's the money?" From sale, it was evident that my brother, playing the role of an interrogator, wastering to make Kenny confess in front of everyone. Kenny, perhaps feeling desperate, struggled to respond immediately. Appiange, lost in thought. The sales money yad. It hasn't come in yet," he stammered in a flustered manner. My brother's anger finally erupted, accusing Kenny of lying. He questioned, "Just how rotten are you, for starters? What's with those souvenirs from Europe in that huge suitcase?" Kenny, seemingly struck by the accusation, closed his eyes and shrunk back, admitting, "I'm sorry, I used up all the money." The revelation left everyone in shock. Relatives began murmuring, realizing the value of the grand piano and expressing disbelief that Kenny could spend $200,000 on just one overseas trip. My brother, looking down at Kenny, lifted his chin with his hand, making eye contact, and delivered a stern ultimatum. "I think you already know from Rachel. But that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you're going to pay back every single penny. If you can't, I'm going to sue you for theft. Are you okay with that?" My brother confronted Kenny with intense determination, his demeanor resembling that of a mob boss, turning a seemingly typical family dispute into a potential legal matter. My brother's intimidating demeanor seemed to have the desired effect on Kenny, who, clueless about the law, lost his voice and began sweating profusely. In a frightened voice, he looked at me and pleaded, "Rachel, please help me." I was unfounded by his plea, as I had nothing to do with the situation. It was entirely his doing. When I dismissed his plea, Kenny resorted to saying something ridiculous, claiming that he had taken care of my mom during the pregnancy and the overseas trip was airward for himself. In a bizarre attempt to justify his actions, he proposed that we've decided to sell the piano, arguing that since we're siblings it wouldn't be considered theft. I couldn't close my open mouth. His absurdity left me speechless. Thankfully, Catherine came to my rescue, asserting, "Enough is enough. Didn't he tell Rachel not to come for caregiving? You even told me you thought I was just after the inheritance entry to drive me away." She exposed Kenny's previous attempts to undermine your connection to the family, revealing that he had been plotting to sell the piano secretly without letting us get close to the family home. My brother's anger peaked again as he addressed Kenny, emphasizing that Catherine had taken care of Mom out of kindness, not for financial gain. He demanded an immediate apology from Kenny to Catherine. Grasping Kenny by the collar, my brother forced him to kneel in front of Catherine, who was visibly hurt by Kenny's insulting behavior. Through tears, Kenny apologized at the relatives present, looked at him with cold eyes. One relative shouted at Kenny to pay back the money from the piano sale as soon as possible to avoid tarnishing the Schneider family. Now misunderstanding the gravity of the situation, Kenny made another odd remark, suggesting that they could save money together as a couple and repay it little by little. Even my uncle was left speechless at Kenny's nonsensical entreat. Feeling that words wouldn't resolve the issue, I decided to fetch something from my room. The card of a divorce lawyer. I handed it to Kenny and told him the calf number, declaring that I wanted our relationship to be over and from now on would communicate through lawyers. Kenny's face turned pale at the prospect of the relationship ending, and he questioned why I would do this when we were about to have a baby. At that moment, I revealed what Kenny had been discussing with his friend on the phone, exposing his true intentions and confirming that I had known all along that he approached me for my inheritance. Surgeoned by a cold stare from everyone, Kenny, realizing he had no way out, adopted a defiant attitude. He expressed a disappointment, revealing that he had hoped to get close to the $9 million inheritance I had received from my mother after We got married this change in Kenny, who had always aboriginal, shocked everyone present. I couldn't help but feel hurt, wondering if I should have been more suspicious of Eamon. I'd met at a dating event who was 10 years younger from that moment. On Kenny Beckham, a stranger to me and my brother. As a natural consequence, he had to repay money from selling the grand piano. Kenny broke down, stating that Heckle didn't do that, but with all their relatives present willing to testify against him, there was no escaping the consequences. However, I assured him that I wouldn't ask for child support in return. I made it clear that he would have no involvement with our child, firmly stating that this was my child alone and he couldn't even claim to Bates' father. Following our divorce, Kenny's life took a turn for the worse as he struggled with poverty, taking on jobs to make ends meet. He eventually faced a new challenge when the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it for a refund. The piano, which Kenny had claimed was in pristine condition, had a large engraving on the back made by my brother, asserting ownership. Kenny hadn't checked the back, likely selling it through a shady dealer lured in by tempting offers. Kenny had to return $200 to the buyer, and considering his debt to my brother, the financial burden became substantial. Items to file for bankruptcy were thwarted by legal action from my brother and me. Now burdened with even more debt, Kenny worked tirelessly in manual labor jobs. Fortunately, the heirloom grand piano was safely returned to my brother. Woe took extra precautions to protect. I'd installed a strong lock on the room where the piano was kept, and even set up a security camera determined to safeguard the instrument. My brother, unchanged from his childhood, Daddy expressed his desire to start a piano school at our family home. As discussions about sharing our mother's inheritance took place, my brother agreed with my decision, fostering a positive relationship with his family. Blessed with the arrival of a long-awaited baby girl, I became a single mom. Catherine Ho had supported me since I was taking care of my mom, continued to be a pillar of strength. My brother stepped in as a father figure for my daughter. Excited about the role my nieces influenced by their father's love for the piano, became a kindergarten teachers, and adored my daughter, grateful for the warm support from my family. I intended to live strong with my daughter, acknowledging the blessings around me and looking forward to a bright future.